Hi everyone! I have a really amazing project I'm starting that I want to show you some of the details before I dive into cutting all the fabric. It's a cornice, well it's 4 cornices with lots of different sections of fabric, 3 different fabrics, welt, and nail heads. So here we go. I'm going to show you the fabric and some of the parts that I already have started. So here is the sketch from the designer of this cornice, 4 cornices that we're doing. And we did this a bunch of years ago. So we're recreating something that we did before with the same fabric but in different colors. So this is very specific and going to be very cool. So try to follow along with me here. This section of this really pretty fabric, I already taped out how much you will see within the blue tape right here. That part will be right here on the cornice on each end. So the whole cornice is 72 inches wide, and I already have, there's 4 of them, I already have them built and covered with batting and inner lining. And so the next step is cutting the fabrics and preparing them to upholster. So this part goes right here and right here. And then on either side of that print, this print, there's going to be a strip of solid blue. So this fabric right here. And then it's each of those blue strips is bordered right here with welt. See, it says cording. So we're going to do the welt in this pretty ivory, and on top of each of those sections is a really awesome huge nail head. So each of those little sections is 2 inches, and this nail head is 2 inches, so it's going to take up this whole section right here. 1 2 3 4 over there, and 1 2 3 4 over there. So, and then in the middle is more of the solid blue. And then even though this is blue right here, it's going to be broken up with that ivory welt. And then the print right here, and then another section of blue with the welt. And then the return will also be the blue. So on the return will be blue, and then ivory welt, blue, ivory welt, print, ivory welt, blue, ivory welt. This is all blue, and then the same thing this way. So what I have done is I drew up my own little map just so I could take notes on the sizes of everything and then how big each cut will be. I didn't want to mess up this pretty drawing over here, so I just recreated it here and made some notes, and now I have another sheet for my cuts just to keep everything organized. So out of the blue fabric, I need 16 cuts, 3 inches wide by 21 3/4 inches long. And how I came up with that is based on this print. So obviously we need 15 inches of the print for the cornice. That's the finished length of the cornice. And then I want to have a little bit on top. And then I want to have enough on the bottom to wrap around to the return. There's no welt on the top or bottom of the cornice, so I need to have enough on the bottom to wrap around for facing. And then on the top, I'm just going to wrap around a little bit. So the 21 3/4 is from this point right here, because that's a nice, easy place to determine my cut. It's just a nice straight line. I can cut right there. So from there, 21 3/4 up to here gives me enough room for centering this, a little bit at the top, and enough for facing at the bottom. So since I want 21 3/4 out of this, then I'm going to do 21 3/4 out of all the other parts too. So this is those little 2-inch strips right here, these little skinny ones. I have to cut them at 3 because of seam allowance. And then I need 4 sections for the center part. So this part right here, Since there's 4 cornices, I need 4 of those. And then I need 8 return cuts. So that means I need 12 inches by 21 3/4. So I'm having enough to wrap around the return and then around the inside and then seam allowance. So that's more than I need, but I want to have that to work with. So the 47 up here, this is 46 wide. So I just added 1 inch to that for seam allowance. I can't have the parts on the face any bigger than the face of the cornice once it's all sewn together. So those parts are very precise, but the return part I can have a little bit extra. And then the pearl colored ivory welt is gonna be, I need 32 of those. So I'm gonna cut those at 2 inches by 22 inches. I'll make the welt and then serge. And then the print, since they need to finish at 9, I'm gonna cut them at 10. I should have wrote 10 inches there, so this is good review. So 10 inches is my cut size, and I need 8 of them. 10 by 21 3/4. So that should be all of the pieces of fabric I need. And then I'll sew it all together, and then I'll pin it to the cornice before stapling just to make sure everything fits. And if I need to tighten anything up, I can do that before I staple it. So that's why I'll pin it first. So it's a lot of cuts, it's a lot of cornices, it's a lot of pieces. And that's why I wanted to show you before I started cutting the fabric, so you can kind of see where I'm starting at, and hopefully by the time they're finished, you'll understand how I got there. So here we go. So I have all of my welt pieces here cut on bias, and they're all cut into short strips that are longer than what I need, but not too long that I make too much welt. So I just want to have what I need, and I don't want to have any seams, and I have 32 strips of welt that I need, so I have 32 pieces of fabric here. So I'm gonna take them all to the machine, and I'm gonna cut 32 pieces of welt, and then I'll make the welt and then serge it, and then I'll start putting all the pieces of this cornice together. This is going to be the 2-inch section on the cornice that has the welt on either side, and so I'm adding those pieces of welt, and once it's all pressed and pulled tight, this is going to measure 2 inches, and there's going to be a 2-inch nail head at the top and bottom of this section. So this measures exactly 2 inches, which I had to kind of experiment before I cut all these pieces, because first I cut them to 3, and then I realized I needed a little bit bigger piece, so I cut them to 3 1/4 right here, because my serger on my welt strips cuts off the lip of the welt at a little bit over 1/2 inch. So I needed a little bit more of the blue fabric to allow for that little bit extra seam allowance. So now that I have the perfect cuts, I'm just going along my assembly line here and adding all of these welt pieces. So this part's easy and it's just really repetitive. There's 16 pieces of blue fabric, which means 32 pieces of welt. So I'm just lining up the edge of the welt with the edge of the fabric, and I'm pulling a little bit on the bottom so that the welt doesn't push, and just laying that part down nicely. And my serger went a little close right there, so I'm gonna make sure that that stays a nice straight line. But then the rest of the way I'm gonna keep all the edges even. So if you have a walking foot sewing machine, you could also use the welt foot on your walking foot. I'm just doing this on my regular sewing machine with the zipper foot. And back stitch in the beginning and the end. And then you can see we have a nice straight line right there. And then I just flip it over and do the other side. And then after these 16 pieces are ready, I will add the pattern pieces that go next to these. It's quite a complicated cornice with all the pieces, but I have them all cut very precisely, and I think it's going to go really well. So I'm just pulling a little bit on the bottom and then laying the top down with a tiny bit of slack. That way I won't have any puckered up fabric. And I'm being really sure to stitch over my first stitch line on the welt, so that when you turn this, you don't see any stitch lines over here. I have a pin on the top of each blue piece of fabric, so I don't forget which way is up. I don't think the color changes, but I just want to keep track of all of the tops of each piece just to be consistent. So there's another one done, and I think I have about 7 more to go, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so we're making really good progress with these cornices. I have the back one that's standing over here almost finished. The only thing left to do on that one is the lining. And then the other 3 are ready to staple. So I have all the fabric pinned into place with all of the measurements checked and triple checked to make sure that everything is straight and square and everything. So each of these sections here is 2 inches, and then I made sure that from this corner to this welt seam right here is 13 1/4, and so that measures just right. And then from the bottom of the cornice to this pattern right here, I'm checking that measurement on each section to make sure that those are all in the same plane. And here we should have 13 1/4 over here too. And then I made sure that the welt is right on the corner of the frame, so I can feel that the welt is exactly at that corner, pinned with the pins going this way so it can't be pulled once I pull this way, and same thing, pinned that way. So everything is ready to staple. All 4 of these are exactly the same, and I made a lot of adjustments to make sure that the measurement from here to the corner on each one is the same, and everything is ready to go. So next step is stapling, and since there's no welt on the bottom or the top, this part is going to wrap around the back and get stapled here, and then same thing at the top. This will just get stapled here, and then I will have to carefully open up and trim some of this welt out of the corner, top and bottom. But I'll try to get some good film of that because that part can be a little tricky. But I'm really happy with how that ended up on that one back there. So I'm going to start stapling along the top. This is the top of the cornice, and I'm just going to go down about 1/2 inch, and then the rest of it will get cut off, and then I'm going to work in this corner, open it up and trim away some of this corner welt, just because that'll get really bulky. And then I'm gonna pull any slack out, but I'm not gonna pull too tight because everything's already pinned in place exactly where I want it. The grain of the fabric is exactly how I want it, and the spacing of where this print pattern is where I want it. So now it's just basically securing everything with staples. So here we go. And then I'll take a lot of pins out as I go. It just helps me to see where I've already stapled and what's left to do. And then before I get too far into the corner, I'm going to staple the return part first. And then I'm going to open up the corner seam with the scissors. There, so now I can trim away some of this extra fabric right here from the seam allowance. I'll have staples right here, and I'll take those pins out and cut away the extra fabric right here. And now I'm going to open up the lip on this welt. Just cutting the welt lip away actually. And now I'm gonna open it, peel it back, and cut away this welt right to the frame. Now I can pinch it and staple that down, and there's no bulk. And then I can pull this part around, and I'm gonna cut away some of that seam allowance from behind. And then I can staple that part down, and it's really nice and flat up there. This part will get covered up on top here, the top of the dustboard, but you can see how nice and trim that corner is. Looks nice and clean. Okay, so now I'll just continue to go down the rest of the top and do the same on the other corner. Then I can flip it over and do the bottom. Okay, so here's the corner that I just showed you on the video, and then I went all the way down and did the top, and then I got to this corner, trimmed out the welt on that corner. So now I'm ready to flip it over and do the other side, which mostly gets done on with the cornice laying on its face, so I can wrap around the back. And I'm gonna wrap the returns on the inside and staple those in the corner there, and then I'll wrap all of this around so it becomes the facing, and it also finishes the bottom edge. And then I'll also clean up this corner similar to how I did the top. So that's the next step.